it's time to call the meeting to order. Please join us in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Special activities for tonight. With this process, I'll ask for a motion to recess the regular meeting and open the first public hearing. So there's a motion to recess the regular meeting.
So moved.
Second. Mr. Butersmall.
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard. Yay. Mr. Wade.
Yay, and we have public hearing number 1, which is a resolution 5357, a resolution to approve, modify, deny the zone change requested by Don Birdsall of Birdsall Consulting LLC, agent for owner Scott DeRoe, to amend the zoning resolution in map of 8.39 acres from the suburban residential zone SR1 to general business zone B2 and dispense with the second reading. And that's where Jeff, the process, by the way, for you that haven't been here, Mr. Palmer will go through what the steps and point out the information that he has. Then we'll ask the applicant to speak, and then we'll have the public speak and ask questions and go from there. Thank you, sir.
And gentlemen, if you're having trouble seeing the Zoom screen, you can push your button on the iPad and you have your links to that. Probably a little bit more important when the applicant does his presentation. This all that I'm going to go over is in the packet. So we're looking at the property that's hashed as the property for discussion this evening. The applicant states the reason for their application due to the shape of land and proximity to I-75 allows us not to develop for residential use. Adjacent properties are not residences. North side is the wood and south side is the church. Business property provides visual and sound barrier to I-75 neighbors. This activity provides additional taxes to the township. Such plot is not large enough to attract high traffic use and minimal disruption to neighbors. And number 6, lot provides beneficial visual exposure. Business is on 75. So if we look at the history of this property, in 1973 it was classified to the rural residential R1. In 2005, the property was rezoned to suburban residential SR1 to comply with the National Land Use Plan. This is a straight request, so there's not a site plan that's required, there's not a lot layout, there's not a specific use that's limited. The request is for the B2, which is our general business classification, which will allow all of the identified commercial uses in the B1 and the B2 to exist on the site. So we look to the north, in Clear Creek Township, we have suburban residential, SR1. To the east, you do have I-75 corridor. To the south, you have suburban residential and R1 residents. If you look across the street, this hatched area is the Franklin Township area of the Clear Creek Franklin Road. It has a zoning classification of R1B, and to the south, you have the city of Springboro. So it's right in the northwest corner of our township, close to the Montgomery County line. 3 properties removed and specified as such. So with that being said, let's look at some of the specifics. This is the aerial that's provided by the property and shows one pole barn on the site. When we look at the actual aerial from the county, you see that it's basically a large field and a pole barn. Start looking at the 2005 land use plan. We're looking first of all at map 4 that says this is outside of the servable area. We look at map 6, has a designation of collector urban. If we look at the Warren County thoroughfare, there's been an update that occurred in 2019. It's now considering that road a local road. We look at map 10, looking at different planning areas, even though it's in the, as I said before, the extreme northwest corner of the township. It's still within what was defined as PA1. Planning Area 1 says this is the northern tier where where a commitment exists for the provision of sanitary sewer at some points in the foreseeable future. It's also an area that's already substantially developed, where approval commitment for future development has already taken place. The future character of the neighborhood has been established in that tier. So we look at the most important part of the land use plan. We're looking at the actual potential uses based upon the previous maps. This is map 11. Identifies the area to be suburban residential. There was a discussion back when the Austin Landing, and the interstate, exit came in play. Would ultimately Quick Creek Township participate in a plan that would start looking at Quick Creek Township going into Montgomery County to Austin Landing? At that point in time, the trustees did not see that that was a viable discussion, and said we want to basically look at what is there at this point in time, and in the future we'll look at that request. And this is one of the first requests to occur since the 2005 plan update. So when this went before Warren County Regional Planning, they made a recommendation to deny the request, saying that it was too intense a classification at its location. There were several faxes, which still blows my mind that people fax, but they did. They faxed information too, so that was part of your packet, requesting that this be denied. There was also a petition that was brought before the zoning commission as part of your packet, requesting that this use be denied. When this went before the zoning commission, they held their public hearing and ultimately came out with a recommendation to deny the zone change request, saying the surrounding areas, both in Clear Creek Township and Franklin Township, are residential. The Clear Creek Township master plan anticipates the area to remain residential. The surrounding area is not ready to change out of residential use. Thus, the request for commercial use will be classified as a spot zoning. So that is part of what is identified in Resolution 5357. After your public hearing, we will move to approve, modify, or deny that resolution. I can answer some questions of the board. If any.
Have you talked to the applicant about any type of modified zone, rather than just a straight B2 that allows a wide range?
Yes, the applicant will do a presentation, and part of their discussion is they're looking for store locks. That fits within our general business B2. There was a discussion I've had multiple times whether you can limit the use through a PUD process. You say this is the specific use that you want to have on the site, and that would limit future uses from occurring on the site. They were not at that point in time wanting to go down that path. It is a lengthy process. There is investment occurring in drawings and the like. They wanted to roll the dice with the straight classification.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Jeff at this time? Okay, I'd like to have the applicant to come up, if you would.
Should be under.
If you would, make sure you state your name for the record, please.
I'm Don Birdsall with Birdsall Consulting. I live in Butler Township, Ohio. I've been asked to give you some information about this rezone application and why we think that it is worthy of consideration.
Okay.
We understand that two other groups haven't seemed to go our way, but we think that maybe they were not seeing the big picture, and we'll see if we're successful in showing you. The map that Jeff has shown you shows exactly where this is in the upper left-hand corner of the township. This is basically a very small portion of your responsibility, and it is the only piece of land in the township that is along I-75, so it is kind of unique piece of land. This shows that we're talking about 7 properties that are in the township. Everything surrounding is in another jurisdiction, a county, the city, or another township. And of these properties, here's an aerial that shows the property to the north. Here's the property we're talking about right here. This this parcel here is undeveloped, and it is separated by the county line. And then the properties to the south, there's a church, and then there's a home, another home, and on down. Of these 7 properties, 3 of them are not residential. So even though the zoning is residential, they're not currently being used for that purpose. It shows that these 3 properties that are not used for residential make up 2/3 of the area along I-75.
Now, when you say that, you're talking about the property immediately north and adjacent is just rural. Is there a home on that? Is that a home?
No, that's just a barn.
So it's
So 1,
basically
2, and the church, those are 3 of the 7 properties are not used for residence at this time. And you can see two of them have never been developed since this was agricultural land back in the 50s. This shows a ground level view of the property, and it shows the high tension wires running across the street and then down the south edge of the property. That is very unfavorable to someone developing it for a nice high-end residence with all that property, all that power overhead. There's all kinds of things that people say come from power lines, and whether they do or not, they're very unattractive, and I doubt the power company is going to be much interested in rerouting them. This next aerial view shows the triangle that we're talking about, and you can see across the interstate that this area is not being developed for residential use, and it's very unpopular use of land to put residents along an interstate highway. And it also shows the little piece of land that we're talking about that is in the township. Every other piece of land in this photograph is in a different jurisdiction. This shows the area to the north of the property, and it is fully developed, all the way up to Austin Boulevard. So you can see there's a fully developed mobile home park, there's a service center, a fire station, a couple of schools, so that whole area. And this road has been widened right down to the county line where it narrows to 2 lanes. This is from the intersection of Woods Road and Austin Boulevard looking south. You can see the road starts out 4 lanes, goes to 3, and then down to 2. And this land around this intersection is still open for development. So the traffic in this area is increasing. It's becoming a major corridor to get to either Franklin or Springboro going down this road. So I think it's naive to assume that over time this won't be widened to 4 lanes. And when it is widened, I think it'll change the character of the area independent of any zoning change. This map is just to show you that there's precedent for the zoning change that we're requesting. There are 4 areas in the township now where B2 is either within or adjacent to all the rural or all the residential classifications you have, SR1, R1, OSR1, and TR1. So within the township, there's a number of places where business and residential coexist.
Mr. Wurzel, can
Yes.
you give us 1 second? What was the share icon, the change, to get that on our,
Oh, if you push the button
just push the button?
and then
Okay.
go to Zoom. Should pop up.
Thank you. That'll make it easier for us to see.
Okay.
And I'm the tech one in the group.
All right, so that's fine. Ask any questions. This is the use that's being discussed between the owner and the developer, is putting in a nice, clean, attractive self-storage area. This one happens to be located along Interstate 75 in Tip City. It's been there a couple of years, and you can see that it's been well maintained and is attractive. There's minimal traffic, it's quiet, clean, and virtually unused at night, so it's not a disruption to the neighborhood. This shows another view, and the traffic that would come in and out of this site is about equal to what's coming off of Countryside Lane, which is right across the street. So it's not going to be a major traffic adder to the area. It shows the inside areas where they're available for storage. This is kind of a concept that's being considered where the office would be along the interstate, very visible. There'd be a lane along the south side of the property to get to the office, and then an earthen barrier, trees, landscape, and then the layout of the buildings would provide a visual and sound barrier for the interstate, and also from people seeing into the facility. So the barrier does a number of different things to protect the neighborhood. The rezone process is in place to deal with changing conditions. The situation, excuse me, I'm going to shut that up. The situation of this parcel of land is such that a change of permitted use is necessary to develop the property. The fact that it hasn't been used for residential since Interstate 75 was put in place speaks volumes about the appropriateness for this particular parcel of land. Quoting from Clear Creek Township zoning department website, a major purpose of zoning is to put land to the use for which it's best suited. Of course, determining the best use of land is not always easy. Some land is best left to be cultivated because of its unique soil conditions. Other land may be ideally suited for commercial development because it's located near a major highway. The parcel meets the definition of ideally suited for commercial development because this is the only land in the township that is along an interstate. So I think this is a unique situation. We request that the trustees grant the requested zoning change to allow this land to be developed and to contribute favorably to the township. Thank you.
Before you go, do you guys have any questions?
Any questions?
No. Okay. We'll have somebody else. Mr. DeRoe?
Mr. DeRose, if you got any questions, I'm probably the man, because I'm the guy that owns it, okay? And I've owned it probably for 30 years. I know every inch of that property, okay? I've talked to law enforcement up, and they pull in the blade up there and see me run it. I've used it for storage for probably 30 years. I used to own it with my dad. All the greenery garden centers you used to see in all the parking lots in the springtime. And we use the facility to store the hoop houses, the tables, and everything else, because I didn't want nothing to be left outside, not only the weather, but to look ugly. Why is that so important to me? Guys, I've lived down here all my life, ever since I came back from New York, okay? I'm in the Hall of Fame at Central State University. I was with the '78 New York Giants, okay? If you see me in a pair of shorts, you understand what happened to me. I got a lot of operations. But, I flew 1,000 miles up here from Dustin, Florida, to make sure I could talk to you guys today. You know, the trailers just north of my property definitely need some availability to storage. Okay, those gentlemen, they're nice trailers. They do a nice job, but there's always something they need to store with. We have 8.5 acres there on Clear Creek Franklin Road, and for many years, it's been a nice piece of property. But I pay to keep it mowed twice a year, and I know some people like that. It's kind of expensive for me. Okay, my number one concern is I have an autistic son. That's 6'5", 6'6", 300 pounds. Okay, and I moved him from Springboro originally to Centerville to put him in a program. And then I moved him to Dustin, Florida, okay, because to a better program. Unfortunately, now Hunter's 27 years old, and he's a very big, large young man, okay? But God love him. He gave him to me and my wife. My wife is former PK Lumber Company granddaughter. So she's been around the area a long time, too. Hunter's just a great kid. But unfortunately, I'm in the process of building him a home right now, building another home in Florida. Autistic kids love two things. It's the vibration of your car and also water. You autistic kids love the water. Okay, of any type. I don't care if it's a hot tub or a pool or anything. And I know we're not talking about autistic kids here, but to me, that's all my life is around this young man. That's what I more or less semi-retired for, to make sure I can take care of him, and the wife and I take care of him 24 hours a day. But we think there's better usage right now for this property, and I think this is it. I've been around here all my life. I think this is a good usage to have, because everybody needs some type of storage anymore. We see it every day, you know. But I greatly appreciate your time, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them for you.
Okay, I'm sure there'll be some pop up.
Can you state your address for the record, please?
Sure. Sure. Mine's in Dustin, Florida. It's 90, you see, I'm 9854 on that. It's 4619 Paradise Isle, Dustin, Florida, 32541.
Thanks.
Thank you for your time.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. DeRoe at this time?
The picture of the store lock, is that the company that you will be using, or is that just?
We'll let the developer speak for that.
I'm the developer. If I
Come
can.
on, please up and state your name and your address. Thank you for putting that out.
Okay, my name is George Mormon. My address is 2384 Emmerich Road in West Milton. And we are currently the owners of this facility for storage. And our intention is to follow that same program with a self-storage facility south of town. We built this 3 years ago. And this is probably, this picture's maybe a year old. But a lot of similarities. I mean, what I found out worked successful on the self-storage is being up against the highway. I-75 is a large advertiser for people in the storage business. Plus, there's access to an off-ramp that's relatively close. So those are the two things that attracted us to this property. You know, there's I think Don had mentioned earlier, a high-powered transmission line, overhead electric lines that go down the side of this property. That's not an issue for our project. There's some grading issues that we can work through. That's not going to be an issue for this project. But we also understand that the traffic count and the screening at the road is important for the neighbors. I think I heard that in the past. And there will be buffering against the roads to address that. So, you know, Mr. Palmer mentioned at the beginning that there's an option. Do we go after a rezoning, or do we go after a planned development? In the past, I've had issues with planned developments on projects because it costs a lot of engineering. And to answer all the questions properly, you have to invest a lot of money. And the decision hasn't happened, but I am willing. I think I heard a question from the trustee earlier that I am willing to say this is what we want to do. I mean, there's a way the variance from the variance, if there's a way that can be stated, I'll do whatever I need to do to allow that to happen. But today our intention is to show you exactly what our, you know, that is a facility. It can be seen. If there's anybody here that has any questions, I'll be happy to give tours of our current facility. We have another one being built right now on Woodman Drive, exact same office look. Our intention is, you know, the picture that Don had showed earlier, that's the same look that we're going to have on the building with all the nice architecture on it. That's the same look we want to have at this location. Is there any questions you may have? I'd be happy to answer.
I don't have any right now, Steve.
No, but it's your intent to purchase the property and put it on?
Yes. I am a builder. I'm a general contractor, so we would be building it for ourselves.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I'd like to open it up for anyone in the audience who'd like to come up and state your name and give us your thoughts, please.
Good evening. I'm Amy Vogel, and I live at 971 Clear Creek Franklin Road, directly across from Mr. Rodero's property. And I am thankful, I went to the Regional Planning Commission meeting and the Clear Creek Zoning Commission meeting, and I'm thankful for their recommendations to deny it. I'm glad that they recognize the future land use map, comprehensive plan, and the township's master plan to see that it is designated for suburban residential, and I believe that there's a good reason why. In your packet, the pages of signatures, I submitted those at the zoning commission meeting, and those signatures represent my neighbors. After spending more than 20 years in Germantown, my husband and I just recently moved to a home there on to the home on Clear Creek Franklin Road. We like rural suburban communities, and that residential stretch along Clear Creek Franklin Road, even down Countryside Lane, is really a treasure. The houses are nice, the lot sizes are large, and the home values are really high. As we walked door to door to talk about the rezoning, we got to meet most of our neighbors for the first time since we had just moved here, and it was a blessing to get to meet them, to learn that they're great neighbors, they're very friendly, down to earth, and we learned that several of them have lived there for 30, 40, 50 years, and that there are multiple generations that have grown up there and they continue to live there in the houses that their parents built. They live a couple doors down from their grandparents, so that's home. It's home for us. We knocked on 30 doors, all the houses from the county line to Penny Royal, and we went down Countryside. So that's how many houses you're looking at there within Clear Creek Township, and then there's Franklin Township across the road. The signatures represent 23 of those houses. Of the remaining 7 houses, 6 of the 7 didn't answer the door, and we didn't get a chance to speak to them. But every single person, every single neighbor that we talk to does not want a business in the middle of our residential street. The intent of the signatures is to show you how many people and families will be impacted in a negative way, whether it's noise, traffic, or increased risk of safety if that property is rezoned. We have no guarantee, because that sale is not final, as to who will actually buy that property and what type of business will be there. And even if a storage business goes in, once it's rezoned, something else could replace it. And there's no interest right now for the property to be up for sale until after this rezoning goes through. And as far as I know, there hasn't been any like requests to sell the property the time that he's had it, to sell it even for residential. And the negative ramifications that once a business goes in, they won't affect Mr. Duro. He doesn't live here. But it will affect all of us that are here, still living in our homes. And then just to talk to that photo, that's an aerial view, but if you actually know where the highway is, the elevation of that land is a lot higher, so you might see the sign, but most of those storage units aren't very tall, so you're probably not going to see it with the elevation between people passing along 75. So just make note of that. But your vote to deny those zoning requests is important in maintaining that residential character of this little neighborhood community that we live in. And I just ask that you just consider the lives of the people and the families that live on my street and on Countryside Lane, so that we can continue to live in a residential section without any public businesses coming in. So, thank you very much.
Anyone else like to make a comment?
Hi.
Hello. You want to state your name and your address?
Sure. My name is Janelle Price. I'm at 9776 Clear Creek Franklin Road. I am 2 houses down from the church. We purchased that property a little less than 2 years ago. We have 2 children, well, we have 4 children total, but 2 of them that are still in Springboro School. I have a huge concern about them catching the bus and getting off the bus after school on a road that continues to get heavier in traffic, and this contributing to that factor. I also have concerns, when Mr. Birdsall knocked on each of our doors, he's done it several times to kind of talk with us and give us an idea of what was going in there. What we've been told is going in there has changed multiple times. I don't think there's any true picture here of what he plans to put in there. There's hope, but there is no contract in place. There is, other than maybe some word of mouth, maybe a handshake. First we were told it was going to be a doctor's office, so not to get worked up. It has slowly changed now to a storage unit. By going B2, we're opening this up to a lot of possibilities. not just a storage unit, no matter how great they try to make that look. There's a lot of businesses you could put in there that would generate a lot of traffic up and down that road, and that affects us. That affects each one of us that live there. That affects my kids that are running in the front yard. Also, that continues to be a highly desirable area. I'm a real estate appraiser. The house next to me sold in less than a week for a little 1,800 square foot ranch stuck in the 70s for $400 and little less than $450,000. I can tell you from experience, you set something like this in the middle of this residential area, it does affect our property values negatively. I thank you for your time. Do you have any questions for me? Thank you.
Anyone else?
My name is Driscoll, yes. Been there in Harrisburg Court, and I got a water problem.
We're in a public hearing.
Public hearing.
We're in a public hearing, but not for what? This is for a zone change, but we'll recognize you after we get through this public hearing.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, if that property was developed as residential, the way it sits today, and I know there's power lines to the south side of it that still could be built on, approximately 8.5 acres, how many homes would you estimate could be put in there by Cliff Creek Township standards? Time you put a road in and...
If you take 85% of the land for lots, so 15% for infrastructure, and you're doing an acre minimum lot size, because you don't have sanitary sewer.
6.
Yeah. Rough number.
Roughly a half a dozen.
Yeah.
Now, the property to the north of it's between this property in question and where the mobile home park.
Yeah.
Just go up on that.
How many acres in that?
I'd have to look for that, sir.
Oh,
Off the
okay.
top of my head.
The area, the parcel north is 9 point something,
Okay.
Roughly the same.
but that's in two counties.
Yeah, I know. You know, ideally, well, maybe not ideally, but one thing to consider is certainly if a developer came along and picked both of those pieces of property up, could put some houses in, for sure. Not that it's the greatest spot in the world for a house, but as the young lady said, it's a good residential area, and with a mounding against the interstate, they could certainly develop that for houses, no doubt. I would not be in favor of zoning this as a straight B2. Quite frankly, I'll let the guys speak for themselves here, but, you know, in many of we don't have a lot of commercial development around Cliff Creek Township, but what we have developed, most of that has been in a B2 situation where we can control the mounding, and if they say they're going to build sewer and lock, that's what they have to build, is a sewer lock. And the way it has to be built with the whatever is worked out and developed between our planner and the zoning commission and the county planning commission. But so anyway, I can see this being a reasonable spot to put in a store lot if it's locked into a store lot. Quite frankly, in my opinion, it'd be a heck of a lot better than putting those two pieces of land, combining and putting in 15 or 20 houses. 15 or 20 houses is going to generate, in my opinion, a lot more traffic than the store lot will, particularly after hours. Not always, a commercial piece of property is not always a bad neighbor. Not always. Sometimes it can be. And again, I would not approve it being a straight B2 zone, because it does open it up to too many things. Personal opinion, what do you guys think?
I totally agree. I don't like I never like that opening, especially in this situation. Mr. Birdsall, you pointed out that the jurisdictions around us are abut that property. Doesn't mean we can't and don't have the obligation to be good neighbors.
And that's what the development intended, is to be a good neighbor.
Right,
But I think that
you can't look at that as it doesn't matter, because they're different than us. We don't have that luxury, okay? Secondarily, I don't like the openness. I completely agree with the residents who stated that. It's kind of like signing a blank check. You can sit and tell me that you're gonna put whatever you're gonna put there. That's the PUD process, that's what that's for, to be able to lock that in. So, that's where I stand on it. I think it should stay. And as the fact that it's zoned residential right now and there's nothing on it doesn't really, I don't find that relevant either, because we have land all over the township that's zoned differently than what's actually going on it. So, you stated you used it to store your nursery product there, and okay, but it's zone residential, so, that's where I stand. Steve?
Yeah, I think, following the zoning decision and the planning decision, unless we know exactly what's gonna go in there and gonna be there, I think we can't open it up to just a regular use.
Well, we have an option today to
Did we-
deny the zone request 100%, or modify it, or approve it. I'm not gonna vote to approve it. However, I would not be opposed to having the applicant come back and reapply for a PUD and bring something back that we could look at as a planned unit development, where we would be locking things in. We would be saying that buffer along the road has got to be 15 foot with trees or whatever. We've done that, been involved in that, and I'm sure you as a developer's been through that. Not the quickest process in the world. I get it.
May I speak on that, though?
Yeah, please come up and have.
Again, George Mormon, I did want to clarify one on I'm happy to do that, because that's always our first step, is to address a design and then submit it for zoning approval. But I did want to reiterate that there is a contract. We have a signed contract between the owner of the land and myself, and we do have intentions of building this. I mean, I'm willing to work, whether it's a vote today and that is contingent upon, or that, again, based off of zoning approval, or even with a denial today, if I have still another chance to come back. But if you're in agreement with our program, that gives me a better understanding that if I were to invest in the engineering, addressing all of the utility concerns and that I can get a better look at it for a second time. But I try to be as honest as I can. That is the facility we will be building if we can.
No, and I'm not saying you wouldn't do that.
I don't know how else.
However, we just, I believe in the structure of the planned unit development and how it locks that piece of property into developing it the way, so we can guide it the way we want it. Is that fair, Jeff?
Yeah, it's ultimately, public site plan review is the way to look at that. So the trustees ultimately have a final decision on what these conditions are. The public sees what's going on, the public has comments, come back, and through that process, the uses are limited to a small list as opposed to being the entire laundry list. And with that, all of the parking, lighting, screening, buffering, colors go underneath discussion. So if the applicant's wanting to do that, I mean, ultimately, we're still in the public hearing process.
Right.
if they're wanting to request this be tabled so that they can bring back information to satisfy the expectations of a stage 1 PUD, they have the opportunity to do that.
Without starting from.
Without starting back at regional planning and the zoning commission, they could start here if that's the desire. If they want to have this acted upon and based upon the action of the straight zone, then take that as discussion. That is,
Because I was looking for the tool that can allow us to do that. Again, my first step is to do the design, the engineering design necessary for zoning. That could be presented, could be questioned, and we could adjust off of that. Having never done this before, I've stated my case.
Well, Mr. Palmer is our expert and can guide you through the process. Now, that's just, that's my suggestion.
Would we be allowing our zoning committee to review before it comes to us for recommendations?
if the applicant at this point elects to enact, for a better word, the PUD upon his property. So it has to be a voluntary act. So he says, I want to apply the PUD to my property. If he does it at this level, prior to you making a decision upon the pending resolution, it would only come back to the trustees. If you truly want it to go back to regional planning and the zoning commission, and then come to you, so you want all parties to help build the process instead of you just being the heavy lifter, then that would be a denial and say, we would prefer it to be, from our discussion, it's denied for a straight zone. What you've heard this evening is we're looking at a PUD as discussion points. It's not a guarantee when you come back that the PUD will be approved. I mean, that's the other part of the discussion, that you're leaning towards that. You want to see a better product than what a straight zone would provide, but you guys have not committed that you are going to approve a PUD because you have to go through that public hearing process.
This is probably the smart thing for us to do. You think, Jason?
I do.
Okay. Thank you, sir. At this time, then, what I'd like to do, any further comments from anybody out there? We're headed to deny this, just so you'll know what the process I'm going to recommend and ask for a decision to deny this zone change. Leaves it up to the applicant to start all over and come back to this PUD. Fair enough?
Yeah, I think that's what the direction I heard this evening is what you want to do. That again, that would be its own. The action this evening is denial, and the applicant has the ability to come back as early as the next process, make an application, fulfilling all the expectations of a stage 1 PUD request. That will be reviewed by regional planning. They'll have a public hearing by the zoning commission. They will make a recommendation. We'll come back to this body. You will have a public hearing and make a final determination. Okay. If that's the case, then close your public hearing and.
Any further comments? Okay, is there a motion to close this public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay.
Mr. Butersbaugh?
Yay.
Mr. Wade?
Yay. And I'd like to reconvene the regular meeting, and with that, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve, modify, or deny this zone change request.
I would move that we deny this zone request.
Second.
Mr. Butersbaugh?
Okay.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay.
Mr. Wade?
Yeah. Okay, motion that, request has been denied, and we'll look forward to any further action. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And all of those came to speak, we appreciate it. We do have another public hearing scheduled. Are we ready to go right into that?
Yeah, we're ready, sir, if you're ready.
Well, we'll do it then.
Yeah.
So we need to, I'd like to entertain a motion to recess the regular meeting and open the second public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay.
Mr. Butersbaugh?
Yay.
Mr. Wade?
Yeah. And this is with resolution 5358, a resolution to approve, modify, or deny the zone change request of Blacktop 48 Properties LLC to amend the zoning resolution and map of .5 acres from residential zone R1 to neighborhood business B1 and dispense with the second reading.
Jeffrey?
All right, so looking on the map, we're looking at the detached area. The applicant states the request of the zone of 8142 State Route 48 from R1 to B1 to accommodate required parking and enhanced green space for new business and adjacent properties in B1 at 8166 State Route 48. Requested parcel is currently vacant with no structure. The revitalization of the adjacent business will require additional parking for zoning. Requested parcel will not interfere with adjacent residents by implementing proper buffers beyond what is required to include privacy fencing, ample landscaping. New business plan adjacent parcel is designed to enhance the community with both beautification and fulfilling current needs. So, history of the property has a zoning classification that was rural residence that was in R1 in 1973. In 2005, in the land use plan, the rural of the residence was taken away to create a new rural standard, which is the open space plus R1. So the zoning classification was changed to a straight R1, effectively the same classification. On April 27, 2006, this property had come before the trustees and was denied by the trustees for neighborhood business plan unit development, so B1 PUD at that time. At that point, the discussion was wholly just for the half acre. This request showing their hand that they have the parcel to the north, they need access to the parcel to the south. That is the reason for the request from a zoning perspective. Again, it's a straight zoning request. No use is required to be identified in lot layout, and no open space is required with that classification. So if we look around to the north, immediate north adjacent parcel is neighborhood B1. To the east and to the south is R1. To the west we have R1, and we also have neighborhood business B1 PUD, which is Greenwell's Gardens. So if we look at the aerial of the property, this parcel, time aerial had a home. This is the left-hand home that has been since taken down. It's driven by, you see that has been raised. This is the B1 property to the north. Submitted a couple site plans, and again, not required, but they're trying to show how the half-acre lot will interact with the 1 1/4 acre lot to the north. And there's a requirement in Clifford Township that you cannot access commercial property through residential property. You can see through this site plan, they're wanting to have one way in and then one way out. So the new egress is through what is currently a residential half-acre lot. Additional parking is required based upon the modification of use of the property, and then they also have expanded use of the football field occurring on the site. So go back up to our slides. Then looking at the properties, question, the area is within, looking on map 4, we're again outside of the suitable area.
Hey, Jeff,
Sir?
I don't seem to be able to pull this up.
Page 60.
Page 69.
And if that's not working, we can read the utility page, sir.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, so map 4 shows it outside of the suitable area. We look at map 6, we have the area designated to be on the principal arterial. Again, looking at the thoroughfare plan was updated in 2019. The classification's changed now to a primary arterial. Looking at the planning areas, this is in planning area 2. Planning area 2 was combined existing development or committed developments represent more than 75% of the area with median density of 1 to 3 acre lots using on-site treatment. We look at the land use plans in that area, it's called to be township residential. So even though we have existing businesses that were shown in the zoning map of B1 PUD and the pre-existing B1, at the time of the land use plan, there was discussion about centralizing businesses at the hard intersections of Vital 5.48 and 73 and 48. And this request came through. Obviously, there'll be discussions as we're having today. So the request is for B1, so even though they're requesting to utilize the property for the purposes of parking lot and access, any B1 use can exist in the property. And from a zoning standpoint, if we're truly going to use those properties with regional planning and ultimately zoning commission, this chunk should be combined together. If utilized today as a half-acre lot as residential, if the health department would allow a leach field based upon the number of bedrooms that could exist potentially on the property, it's an existing lot of record, it could theoretically go forward. I'm not sure that you're going to be able to meet the minimum 1,250 square foot for a home on that parcel. Leach field requirements can be tough, but so its probably potential is to be absorbed by an adjoining parcel, whether it's to the south or to the east. Parcel to the north is the same owner, they're wanting to absorb it into a commercial classification. So that is a plus.
So the parcel to the north is some business now,
Correct.
and the same ownership,
Correct.
and they want to absorb this piece of property into that as a kind of combining with the meets and bounds deed or some kind of, I'm sure.
Yes, as part of what, if it was successful with tonight's classification change, if that were to occur, then when they would build, I would want to see it combined together so that the parking and the wiffle ball field and the access truly is part of a single chunk instead of being two separate parcels.
Okay, so is that what is on the north part, is I missed that?
Yeah, let me go back down to
Okay.
the current, this is their current plan. So if we look at the building, this is what used to be Carl's Consignment, the Happy Spy area. The dotted area is the current single-family home / commercial, so it's a multifamily designation that existed in there. Legal non-conforming. The initial thought was to make this into part of their business. They since have revised their plan and they're going to remove that structure.
Okay.
Still, with what they're proposing to do with this sports practice facility, they need enough parking that requires them to go beyond the confines of the parcel or do a redesign of their current layout to accommodate the parking for the site. So ultimately, if approved, the property would grow to an acre and 3/4. Still has to get health department approval or OEPA approval for facility. Still has to get the Ohio Department of Transportation's blessing for access. Still needs require building department for modifications of use. Those types of things are still up in the air, still pending for the B1 activity. This activity would add to or help eliminate some of the issues that may exist with the former discussion. Okay, so with that being said, when this went for regional planning, they recommended approval of the request. This went before the zoning commission. There was, Grandma's Gardens did send a letter to the packet. Doug is present this evening. The gist of his letter was that since he went through the time, energy, expense, and activity to solidify use on the property to be a PUD and it's been successful, discussion through that letter was, why don't we have this entire 1.75 acre tract come in and have similar review? Again, the PUD process that we just witnessed in the last public hearing is something voluntary that has to be placed upon the property. Current request is only for the half acre, not for the 1.75 acres. If that's something that is ultimately you guys want to have your hand in discussion for that, the entire parcel, half acre, entire 1.2 would have to come back for stage 1, so we'd have to restart the process. Okay. So ultimately, when the zoning commission looked at that request, they said that since the owner's trying to consolidate the lots and make it viable, they didn't believe that that half acre rezoning was an anomaly. They thought that since it was connected, that it actually was a growth and establishing that there could be beneficial use of the existing classification, and the rezoning process ultimately would require the new established buffers, lighting, requirements of zoning would because of upgrading classifications. They recommended approval of the request.
Zoning
And regional planning. Correct.
our zoning.
Yes, the Clear Creek Township Zoning Commission and Warren County Regional Planning. So we have a similar condition where we have something that doesn't meet our plan and a different outcome. I think the outcome is different because there's an existing parcel that is actually trying to grow, as opposed to no parcel in proximity and being in the center of the access. So that's where they got to where they're at. That's some of the background. I can answer questions before I turn it over to the applicant.
Anybody have any questions?
Okay, so ultimately this evening, your resolution for this discussion is 5358. You'll either approve, modify, or deny after you close your public hearing. Great.
Okay. The applicant is here, if they'd like to come forward, please.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Ron Sparks. I'm one of the,
Need to also give us your address.
10145 Park Edge Drive, Washington Township, 45458.
This is all being recorded, so we'll clean everything up.
Sure. I'm one of the owner members of Backstop 48 Properties LLC. We've asked our legal counsel, Lynn McMurray, to speak on our behalf tonight. And that's okay?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
I'm glad if you would state your name and address.
Absolutely, thank you. My name is Glenn McMurray, the law firm of Cass, Teniers and Hawes, so I'm a partner there. Our business address is 40 North Main Street, Suite 1700, Dayton, Ohio, 45402.
Thank you.
So I'm here to answer questions on behalf of my clients. I'll start by saying that part of this passion project really evolved, I think, from something at least I relate to, because I'm a baseball coach for my kids, and they were the same. And kind of recognizing that there may be a need in the area for baseball teams and families to have a place to kind of congregate and practice and have activities, they conceived of this idea to utilize what was an existing B1 zoning parcel, that is the original larger parcel that was identified for you previously, and combine it with what was an R1 parcel that was much smaller, and that, given, frankly, the new and better zoning restrictions, which I think was already discussed previously this evening, was likely to remain somewhat of a vacant lot for the foreseeable future. And my clients here today are asking for the trustees to vote to approve this zoning change. They view this as an opportunity, frankly, to invest in the community. Indeed, they've already invested a significant amount of money in both of these properties, which certainly is not dispositive of your decision, but I do think it's an indicia of their willingness to invest in the community to make this a destination for families and for children. All told, the maximum capacity, both indoor and outdoor, of this facility at any one given unit, from what we've been able to ascertain through engineering and some of the preliminary plans, will be a total of 150 total. So this is by no means some massive structure. There are certainly existing zoning restrictions that would be implemented upon them, even if this were a R1, to make sure that they were not fundamentally or in any way materially impacting adjacent properties. So even if granted, I do believe that there is a body of protection for neighboring parcels who may indeed share legitimate concerns. I think they should be able to voice. I think many of those concerns are resolved by existing zoning restriction. The concept of a PUD, I treat those with all of my clients when I say we're always happy to discuss, right? I think the difficulty we have with this type of restriction, and indeed some of the case law that we've looked at this, is when we're looking at just the .5, which is the subject of the application, a PUD on the .5, as mentioned by Mr. Palmer, becomes somewhat of a difficult prospect, given the fact that the adjacent parcel is already zoned B1 without restriction. When I look to the B1 zoning section of the zoning code here in Clear Creek Township, the nature of the businesses that can be placed in a B1, I would say, are relatively modest. I do not believe there is a major concern that they could abuse that restriction, in part because the conditional uses for which they would have to then still seek special permit would afford this body the ability to make sure that whatever business was put in place would be one that would be, even with this modification, further consistent with their development plan. So with that said, I'm certainly open to questions from the trustees. I welcome them, and respectfully request that we would vote to approve this change.
Okay. Anybody have any questions at this point? Thank you, and we'll see if anybody else has some comments. Thank you. Anybody else have any comments, suggestions?
My name's Doug Reinhardt from Grandma's Gardens, and I recognize a bunch of you guys 40 years ago. I sit here and remember that, Ed? That was rough,
I
wasn't
was
it?
gonna say, I'm thinking you're only recognizing one of us.
Yeah, that was tough, and in fact, I noticed Noel Poe's heads down there. I think you, at the time, was the only guy that kind of believed in us, but anyway, I'm real proud resident and business to be here in the township, and
We're glad to have you.
yeah, thank you. And I welcome a business across the street, so I don't have really big issue here tonight. My only worry is that I don't know what, I tried to look up today what B1 zoning is, but can a gas station end up there, or a bar, or something like that? Or what's the...
Yeah, ultimately, it's businesses that are sent to be as a local focus. So local retail business, service establishments such as grocery, fruit, vegetable store, meat market, drugstore, street repair, those types of uses, commodities, and performing services for residents in the neighborhood, sit-down restaurant, fast food restaurant, outdoor, gas station, bakery, funeral home, business, second-hand store, the like. So it's the smaller focus, and the intent is that the neighbors, so if you think about, back in the day with everything being a city, you had a block, and then you went to the corner market. It's that kind of concept as opposed to going to that big mall that you had to travel to. So it's not a regional draw, it's more of a local draw. So if you're trying to balance that out for uses, those would be some of the things. But yes, as identified, a gas station is an acceptable use. I'm not sure how you put one on a half acre based upon all the restrictions that exist, but by permitted use, yes.
I guess I think if you tack that onto a bigger parcel, then you could do a speedway there, or I worry it could be
I think you're right.
a sports bar or something, and that's my worries. I don't worry about the present owners at all. I think this sounds like a great project. I just worry, like, this is going to, our business will be in our family for hopefully generations to come, and I just worry like 30, 40 years down the road, which I know you guys don't worry about. I've been here 40 years, and I
do.
But anyway, that was, when I suggested the PUD, I guess I wasn't suggesting that for the entire parcel, but I realized people aren't going to want to do that for a little piece of property. That property's been vacant, by the way, for 43 years. Don Class tried to put a septic system in there in the county.
So to your point, that's exactly going to be the challenges they're going to face.
Right.
That's the challenge, that you've already got a B1 there.
Right.
So what do you do with that half acre? I don't even think they could put a house on it.
Yeah.
Not now.
I don't think you could.
No, so that's, I understand your concern. I think that they'll be good stewards of the property, and I think part of that's going to be because they're going to be restricted to be, even if they didn't want to be. Not that they would, but.
The only other thing I worry about is the access too, and I understand why you would put that on there, because that's the driveway in that parcel. But traffic coming out of our driveway is hard enough. They don't line up, and I don't know how people could avoid getting in an accident. But when we're busy, and a lot of cars flow in and out. That entrance now, I think that could be scary for a mom taking off with their child after an event or whatever.
That'll be the state that makes that call, correct? Yeah, because it's a state road.
Yeah, I know it doesn't need
Yeah.
that. But
Well, still a concern.
Yeah.
Well, we could certainly say, well, we think you'll look at it this way.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't listen to us much,
Yeah.
but
No.
Yeah.
quite frankly. But
We'd
Well,
like to
welcome.
listen more.
I welcome a viable business across the street from it, so like I say, I'm not here to oppose it, my main concern is a speedway or a sports bar, because those are so popular anymore, and I could just see that this could evolve into something else, and I know there's no way that we can restrict everything, but, and then 150 people at a time, that's a lot of cars. That road's already big. It'd be nice if we could get the traffic down, have a speed limit down on there a little bit, because it's 55 right in front of there, and it's kind of here.
Good luck on that.
No, that's the same state folks that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah.
Busy there, you ever been to Grandma's Garden and they go on Saturday?
Yeah. Matter of fact.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Jeff, I have a question. If we denied this, I kind of think I said this before, but anyway, could we suggest or ask the applicant to combine the current B1 zone, approximately 1 acre? Is that right?
Acre and a quarter.
Acre and a quarter.
Combine that with this half acre and then consider the B1 PUD? Is there any mechanism to do that? I know we can't say that you have to do this.
Yeah, you can deny the request as submitted. You can tell them that you're wanting to see the entire thing come back and do a review of that. They can choose to never come back because they're not required to with the 1 1/4 since it's the pre-existing. If they ever want to use the half acre and if the access is truly the only way to get in and out as specified in the plan with this location, then that may drive them back here, but again, it's going to be a voluntary action on their part.
That'd be a way we can figure this out. Got a good idea? You guys got a good idea?
I don't
Have a PUD just for the parking lot, or you,
Well, you could have a PUD just for the parking lot, I'm not sure. I mean, at the end of the process, if you're wanting to limit it to a parking lot, that's where the use would be. We go through a stage 1, a stage 2, and a stage 3 just for that half acre. And if that's what you really want to see an expansion because you want to be comfortable that anything that doesn't meet the plan has gone through a PUD process, which we've done in other parts of the jurisdiction, then that would be a way to go. It's never going to pick back up that 1 1/4 unless the applicant decides to roll that into the request.
It's almost this is probably
but what that would do would be 5 years down the road and say, hey, we want to sell this, and maybe Speedway wants to go there, or some nice people with a tattoo parlor.
Yeah, I mean, it limits the use, but if you only limit the use to parking or commercial use, then it always will be a viable parking lot for an adjacent use. It's never going to limit the use on the adjacent use. So that's the rub of getting access through what is, at this point in time, residential to commercial, which is a zoning issue, which is bringing before you. They need access, they want to extend it out, be like zoning classification. It has to be non-residential. I don't know if there's value of it being an office designation for you to still be the purposes of parking, still be the purposes of access. It's non-residential, so it's out of the zoning conflict, but you're limiting uses that exist there if that is truly desired. But again, you can't limit the uses up in the 1 1/4 so.
Yeah, and admittedly, when I began to evaluate this issue, I was like, oh, that's a tricky conundrum, because it is. I mean, and legitimately, and my clients recognize that. I mean, they really do. You know, I think when we evaluated, how, and when my clients evaluated how to submit this before this body, they considered whether a PUD would be appropriate for the single 0.5 acre parcel. When we researched the issue of whether or not a PUD could then expand to a parcel that was not subject to the application, our findings concluded that it could not. For the same reasons, Mr. Palmer, I think I'm saying that correctly, right, Mr. Palmer? Am I saying that last name correctly?
Like Arnold.
Okay.
Yeah,
I want to make sure.
Person's
Okay.
not screwed
I would
up.
have felt bad if I was calling it something wrong. So, but when we when,
Call him up.
But when we evaluate that, much for the same reasons that Mr. Palmer identified, it comes back to the issue of, whether they voluntarily want to put then the additional parcel at risk. The concern over Speedway and some of those issues, well-founded, but for the fact that a mere jaunt down the road, that can happen anyway. And I think the other issue too, is that, when we look at these spaces, I know the concern was identified about 150 people. That's a max person capacity. I will tell you, if you've ever had the joy of attending a kids pitch game in the first season where kids are actually pitching baseball, I can tell you that, it becomes a tiresome process, okay? And I don't anticipate as they begin to have these events, they're going to have mass humanity, certainly not 150 individual cars. I think when we look at this as a whole, the difficulty with the PUD in this particular parcel is its inherent limitation as it is currently zoned. To require that it be parking, I think probably does not assuage the concerns, though, that are identified otherwise, that, hey, it could become something else. Because, indeed, that's really the case. I think trying to make it a PUD for really anything probably actually inhibits the value of that 0.5 and indeed probably the larger parcel, because I think probably an asset to the community is that they do become merged, because I think it will just provide for a nicer facility. Again, my clients are a relatively young family who are wanting to invest, in the community in a way that makes this a destination. And, with the PUD process, while more intensive, I think even though a proposed, use is not required, I think they've given you really not only what have been a significant investment in engineering plans and design, they are well on their way to working with the Department of Transportation on several issues. So in some respects, they've probably at least come pretty far in what would be the concerns, covered by what that PUD process would entail, and I think that's reflected in their materials. I think more than anything, I think the best use for the property likely is for it to be aligned with the larger parcel, and frankly, I'm excited to see, what this becomes, having now seen the plans. So with that said, I'm again open to further questions, if you would like, and would again encourage passage.
Steve, any further questions? David? Appreciate that explanation. Yes, sir, come on up. Either one of you, come up, yeah.
Jeff, could you pull up that schematic that shows the different plots across the street? My name's Pat Brackey. I live at 8193 Jack London. I live next door to it. It's the best landscaping center you could ever live next to. The nicest people. Didn't know Doug was going to be here. We bought 10 acres behind Doug. It was a bean field. We put in the one where you can see Doug's property as well, Grandma's Garden. So we live directly behind the Grandma's Garden Center. We put in almost 300 trees, trying to build a green space, 2 ponds. So it's all about creating a nature reserve. My biggest concern is we come out of Hemingway, and there's been some serious accidents there. My son was rear-ended doing 55 miles an hour. Car was totaled. His girlfriend, same thing, was in a 3-car accident. I'm worried about the traffic flow going in and out of there. So when these cars are coming southbound, if I can stop.
Yeah, please do.
So when they're coming southbound, they're going to stop. And when they stop, we've got to wait for them to get out. And the worst part is when we're going northbound, we've got to stop. If this car is holding traffic up there and we got to stop, that's when we get rear-ended. There's a huge amount of traffic moving through there. It's difficult for us to get in and out now. Boy, you can't find anyone who likes baseball and looking for more than me. But I'm worried about the volume. I'm worried about people getting hurt. So those are my biggest concerns. I don't know how to address that. This extra half acre going to make that much of a difference? I don't know. But we've got a traffic problem there now, and I'm worried about what's going to happen long term. So I just ask you to consider that before you make your decision.
Sure, and that whole road is just,
Yeah, I was going to say,
we get that.
And then when you've got that directly across Grandma's Gardens, both of them in the spring, you think about what happens with both those activities between the baseball and what's going to happen to the garden center. It's going to get really congested. So I'm worried about the safety of the people. The neighborhood that I live in, there's some very, very nice homes there, so just worried about that. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a gentleman back here in back. Come on up, yeah, come on up, we'll
Good evening. My name is Jeff Polis. I live at 1447 Hemingway. I purchased the home a little less than 2 years ago, and there was a certain ratio of businesses to homes in the area that I bought. And I would like to appeal against this business because of the nature of it. The idea of putting 150 people in a sports arena in the middle of the neighborhood of homes, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. Grandma's Gardens has been the perfect business to live near. Not only is it beautiful, but they close at 5, very slow during the winters. On the occasional busy weekends, we hardly even know that they're there. To put a outdoor sports arena with lights and 150 people would cause noise and light pollution. That would really devastate the evenings of the residents in the area for quite a distance. I myself can hear the rodeo down on 48, or down on 73, probably a mile away. So you put 150 people in a concentrated area, and that noise pollution will travel quite a bit, having a devastating effect, in my opinion, on the homes in the area.
Good. Appreciate your comment. Thank you. Anybody else have any comment? Yes, ma'am.
My name's Melissa Hoban, and I live at 1604 Wisteria Way, and this property right here is part of our land. And I want to just ask you guys to maybe vote against making this a B1, just because, like they have said, there's so much traffic in and around that area. I was almost sure in the 2, and the people ended up going into by where Carl's Cabinets was, rather than hitting the back of me and my 2 girls. It's just that flow of traffic being 55 miles an hour. If you have, people going into Hemingway, even coming out of Grand Cypress, which we live in, is very hard at times. And so having so many different areas of coming onto that road at 55 miles an hour, I think is very dangerous. Being there, now they're building homes, but I've seen so many accidents of people just getting hit, and we can see the sirens or see the lights, and I just worry about that and just the congestion, and I think the business is a great business, but then to annex that parcel of land and create more parking spaces and creating more traffic is just kind of a concern to me, and I know others as well. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I want to start by saying I think all the concerns raised are, I welcome, kind of the opportunity to talk about them, because they're, legitimate concerns. And I think one of the things that I would probably point to when we look at, particularly on the issue of traffic, I'm going to orient this for, at least in part, some of what they're going to be identifying with the Ohio Department of Transportation. So one of the, I think, our brethren in Columbus and their infinite wisdom, right? One of the Department of Transportation issues that we often will encounter when we're running into these circumstances are the exact issues that you raise when we're having these, congestion things. And they kind of, in fact, some of the legislative history behind the Ohio Department of Transportation and how they address that was to give them a check and balance as to what had become problematic traffic areas over time as people redeveloped. It kind of gave them a continual opportunity to check on how traffic was flowing and if there were issues. And so what we're looking at here with this particular adjustment as I understand it, what is being discussed with the Ohio Department of Transportation are ways to not only make this an effective use of the property, certainly with an entrance and an exit, but also ways to make sure that this property can be used safely. And while that may well be a decision for the Ohio Department of Transportation, one of the items that they are evaluating is how one can safely progress across State Route 48 from Hemingway, but then using that drive as a dedicated entrance only. Because of the very issues that have been identified, there is a recognized concern that if one were to pull out at that point, given the congestion that Hemingway and State 48 creates, that there would be that concern, which is why part of what they're discussing is a dedicated entrance only as part of that plan. And then if you see down, you see new exit, okay? And in fact, while the Ohio Department of Transportation still has to do a final determination of how we will treat that, some of the restrictions, and indeed some of the anticipated restrictions I would anticipate, is whether or not there then becomes a requirement that exit proceed in one direction only to provide for the safest possible exit from the property, which is certainly part of that process. So sometimes when we see these changes take place, it inures to the benefit of the neighboring parcels because it starts providing a way in which the Ohio Department of Transportation can then restrict that. And it does become, frankly, an expense upon the applicant, as they go through that process too. So you will often see neighboring facilities benefit, sometimes at the expense of the applicant, in a new, better way for traffic to progress. The other item that I want to identify is when we say a maximum capacity of 150, I think it's important to note that while I'm sure any business person would love to see maximum capacity at all times, that is not likely the case. Indeed, the garden center across the street has a higher maximum capacity, just given the amount of maximum square footage of the building and parking lot area. So when we talk about that, 150 as a maximum capacity limit for nearly 2 acres of property is actually a relatively almost self-imposed maximum capacity to intentionally limit congestion, because it likely will not be at maximum capacity, and that will probably likely not be a concern in terms of massive congestion. I think the other item that I do want to address, noise pollution. Certainly there can be noise in youth baseball. I don't disagree, but I think in this circumstance, again, those are usually concerns that are already addressed by some of the existing zoning restrictions and regulations. That can also come into play as they start going through the various other permits and checks and balances that the township has, and how they position the lights, and how they do certain things as they seek that permitting. So I think in this circumstance, some of those concerns will be addressed through the further permitting process. My clients are very committed to kind of while resistant to a PUD restriction, just given the limitation of this property, my clients are generally open to being collaborative with the permitting process to make sure that those concerns do get addressed.
Okay. I'm seeing only 16 more parking spaces on that part.
It's 25, actually.
Is it?
Yeah, 27.
On the half acre?
There's a revised plan, proposed plan.
Is that within the yellow?
Yeah, the new revised plan within the yellow.
Yeah, the one I'm looking at is different.
Yeah, there was a new one that was recently proposed that drew that back, actually to limit the maximum outdoor and indoor capacity issue to the 150.
Oh, okay.
So that's why they.
So I'm looking at the wrong one.
Yeah, there's one now that I think, is it 16 or 17? 16. I think the most current iteration that has been submitted is now 16.
If I may.
Yeah.
Just to reiterate, one of the things that I'm concerned about is if we just have 2 lanes here, when this traffic stops, is going southbound, if it gets stacked up as these cars are going northbound, it's hard for me to get out now. If there's no turn lane for me to be able to get out, and these guys are backed up, I'm stuck there. So that's a big problem for us. I mean, it's, at 5 o'clock, it's hard for me to get out of there. So unless they widen this out, it's a problem. And right now, when I'm going northbound, as I told you, when my son got rear-ended, what I do now, because it's so bad, is I try and time the gaps for cars so I don't have to stop, because it's that bad. So with these cars coming out, I'm just worried about, sorry about that, I'm just worried about accidents. So I'm just worried about additional congestion, so keep that in mind. And I'm also concerned about the noise pollution as well. I understand that I can't root more for kids in baseball, but I worry about the noise pollution because it does travel, so.
Oh, yes, please.
I didn't want to be the only one that didn't speak tonight. My name is Laura Allery. I live at 8706 Cypress Ridge Trail, and this is what happens when you don't bring your husband to the meeting. You guys can talk. I just wanted a couple of points of clarification. So they can do what they want to do on the existing parcel.
Existing property.
To me, as a practical matter, if they can already do that, this is a better plan, letting them come in and out, maybe one direction. All of the things that we're talking about, while they're valid concerns, they're not addressed at this body, are they? The traffic pattern.
No, that's gonna be,
We
the
can't-
state's gonna make that call.
So to me, knowing that that's just a half-acre lot that can't be built on, I live back there, it's a total eyesore. And if we keep doing what we've always done, we're gonna get what we've always got. These people are willing to put some money into it. So I just wanted to make sure I was understanding this properly, that they can already do what they want to do, right? So all the conversation about usage is not really relevant.
On the current parcel,
On the current
correct.
parcel?
Yes.
So I guess I'd be in
About
favor.
the half acre.
Yeah, and to make these people go, as a practical matter, through a PUD for half an acre seems onerous, particularly when the extra acreage is going to allow better traffic flow, not worse, when they can do what they want to do anyway. Am I wrong?
That's a very good point.
Okay, I just wanted to make
No, that's,
clarification.
and I think it's important for everybody in this room to understand, from my perspective, and I'm not gonna speak for Ed and Steve, but we all have the same concerns about Route 48 that you do. We don't have that control. I wish we did. But
We put a light there.
we put a light right there, absolutely.
They won't put it right,
No.
Route 40, there's no way.
No, I agree.
But you
Yeah,
can
so-
control whether there's 17 more parking spaces and
Yeah.
17 more cars coming. I don't know.
Not enough.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
The concept is great.
Right.
It's just volume, how much volume,
Yeah.
like he acknowledged,
Well,
Grandma's
it-
Gardens already has how many spots,
So-
and when you put the two of them together.
to your point, that's going to be dictated as they go as well. That's gonna be dictated by sanitary sewer, that's gonna be dictated by other things, that's gonna affect it. When you're just, if it was just a ballpark and we had game, what we deal with at Patricia Allen is different than that. But, in this case, if they're gonna have a restaurant, coffee shop, those things are gonna be dictated by the ability to have septic.
And at one time, there was discussion about a drive-through as well, so,
Right.
right? So you can see our concerns.
I think on the comment of drive-through, pursuant to the current zoning restriction for a B1, a drive-through is specifically a conditional use that they would have to get even further permission to address.
Right.
And I don't think, and I think the concept of a gas station too, my understanding and looking at the history of this parcel, there's actually, I believe, an old underground storage from a gas station that was shuttered many years ago, even before the dilapidated structures were placed on the property. So I think I think our last speaker adequately summed up everything. So much so, frankly, that I'm not sure why my clients paid me to be here, because she did a great job. But it is a circumstance where you do have a parcel that they currently have, I think within appropriate restriction, somewhat of an unfettered ability to determine within B1 what they're going to do. The addition of parking spaces with dedicated green space is really intended to improve upon that in the hopes that it will better that area, which I think it will. I think those concerns are all legitimate concerns, and I think that many of the concerns addressed, though, will ultimately be resolved by the further permitting and restriction process. But in the meantime, we will not be able to start addressing those concerns under any potential use of that property unless it becomes a property that is useful. And that is what we are proposing here today.
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question, because if this, if this doesn't get passed by ODOT, and we now have another parcel of land that's R1 that goes to B1, is there any way to reverse it back to an R1 if it doesn't go through?
If ODOT doesn't approve what they're showing right here.
Right, so we can't make that B1 contingent upon.
So the request is to go to a new zoning classification after the trustees make a final act. It sits in what's called referendum for 30 days. After that, it's a final change to the map.
Okay.
The only way to change it is to then go back through this process and change it to another classification. So there's not an automatic reversal for them to do X or Y.
We can't count on ODOT getting the job done and saying that this is the way it has to be.
ODOT's going to do what ODOT's going to do, unfortunately.
A good example of that, have you been to the United Dairy Farmers in Red Lion?
Yes.
All the directional turning that you have to do in that gas station, that's the work of ODOT.
The intersection of two state routes.
The intersection, yeah, so those are the kinds of things that they, to their point, I mean, it's, that it would look like that, in my opinion, is unlikely. That's just my opinion.
Well, and that's my concern, that ODOT's gonna come in and say, no, you can't do this. And now you have, and maybe they pull out and say, okay, then we're not gonna do this here, but now you have a bigger parcel of land that can be, B1, and then you're saying that, anything else can go on it, and now you have this big parcel of land. That's my concern, because I think that's a great idea. I mean, I'd much rather this than the gas station or something else.
But every parcel every use that's going to be on there gets judged by the building department and ODOT and the health department or OEPA on can it actually logistically fit on the property. Right. And how can things go. So if ODOT says no to this use, then they would be up for the next use that would be.
Right, right. But
just as all those other entities would then say, okay, is this next use appropriate? Can we meet all the minimums that exist there? So there's always going to be a check and balance. It's not as if it doesn't work for this, then the next person then gets it without any review. The next person is going to have same review, same criteria.
But now you're just going to have a bigger parcel of land.
Conceptually, you have a larger chunk, but
right.
If you can't fit this use on that chunk, then there'll be discussions about what uses can fit on that chunk. And then ultimately, the property owner will say, okay, I can't fit any uses, or I can only fit this use. Then they may come back for a zone change. If they can't fit anything on there, then they may come back for something else. They may start acquiring properties further south, to grow, and eventually that becomes enough acreage to do what ODOT requires of them and what OEPA requires of them and the like. So those things are all in process. Again, today we're talking about that half acre. And it is a point of, okay, can it spread? Does it not spread?
Right.
For discussion.
Right, okay.
And I want to be clear too, this also proposal is being submitted not on behalf of, pardon me. I want to be clear too that this proposal is not being submitted on behalf of, disinterested prospective buyers. My clients have purchased the property, right, and have invested in trying to make something of this property. So this is not a circumstance where, just to be clear, and that may not have even been what you were trying to suggest, this is not a circumstance where they will no longer be the owners and someone else could come in and do something totally radically different, because even if ODOT were to change their mind about how this, or tweak this, or adjust it in such a way that this type of plan wouldn't work, my clients are still the owners and of both parcels, so they own both. So this is a circumstance where they're just trying to improve upon what is there currently, as the individuals who are the interested owners of the property.
Well, I think the concern is, after these current owners are no longer wanting to be doing what we're doing, they'll want to sell it, and then we don't know who's going to buy it or what they're going to want to do, but we can't read people's minds that far down the road.
Yeah, that's, it's a fair question though, of course. I mean, time marches on for us all, right? And, there's a level of control we can enact on property up to a certain point. But, the current zoning, again, of the much larger parcel that leads into Hemingway is currently zoned for what we want it to be zoned at. And at this point, our hope is that what that property is ultimately used for will be improved and maybe lessen congestion by affording the lower part to be parking space, and then perhaps a better exit from the property so as not to further congest him.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments? No, gentlemen, what be your wishes? Anything else before we close the public hearing? Okay, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Muerspaw.
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yay.
Mr. Wade.
Yeah. Okay, reconvening our regular meeting, and we do have resolution 5358 to approve or did not approve, modify, or deny this zone change of 0.5 acres from R1 to business, neighborhood business zone. Gentlemen, what are your wishes?
I would make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yay.
Mr. Muerspaw.
Yay.
Mr. Wade.
Yay. Okay, so now that, before that, it can be still go to referendum within 30 days.
Yes, so it starts a 30-day process. After that, it'll be effective on zone change.
Okay, thank you all very much.
If you have questions, give me a call.
Thank you for your time. Glad I got your name right.
But you could just figure it out.
That's how I work that too.
I know.
They have lights out there now, it isn't developed as a whole.
Correct.
No.
It's not.
No.
There's nothing there. So the lights will have to go through our minimum zone classification, just as a part of the zoning for that, just as their streetscape buffer and their perimeter buffer.
Well, there's one way obviously to include noise is, when the lights up, just like they didn't do with Green Mountain Park.
Yeah, and they're gonna have to decide how they want it to flow as a true use for the kids. You know, how many kids, they wanna be out there at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock?
Well, if you look at what they've got,
All right.
it's just one piece of the puzzle. And
You ready for the Reds to start playing?
Or
You ready for the Reds to start playing, all right?
So the lighting for the parking lot, I don't think
Go
would be
scratch.
an issue. That might be
They're gonna
it.
put all this into it.
No, most of it, yeah.
everything except for the wiffle ball.
This
So
is the
the batting
new, this is the new
cages,
concept. Otherwise they can't use it for almost half the year. They put it
I
on the
heard
roof.
it, I didn't really think that, I thought they probably, maybe it's a story, but So,
But it's practice, it's,
That's where the kids are gonna be dumped in
Yeah.
practice.
yep.
And then, at some point, they're wanting to have, you know, a snack bar,
Coffee
area
shop,
that
restaurant,
they're gonna, they're gonna hang out.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you,
Just
I've been in and out of places like this for the last 20 years. That portion of it usually doesn't work. His mom just wants to drop them off and get out of there.
Yeah.
They don't wanna hang around. They'll go down to game day.
Yeah, where you can get alcohol.
Yeah.
Where you're close enough. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I need to use the restroom and get some water.
Okay.
We can take a 5-minute or.
I think we're on that at this time.
Okay.
I think for the
Two
record-
removed and one being put
For
down.
the record, we'll just say that.
Okay, so they remove them too?
5-minute intermission,
I
the
don't know.
meeting still won't.
So they had 3, okay. That's fine.
Works for me.
Okay. 7:10.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Well, the county animal rescue's coming to get 2, and the
Perfect.
vet's coming to put down 1.
Okay.
In bad shape.
Sounds like
Who are these people's names?
Oh, all those people, I'm sorry.
No.
I thought you looked outside and you talked about those people, but I don't know who you're talking about on halfway.
I'll ask.
You do? Wow. With all due respect, say that one more time.
Have you had any conversation with any of you about that?
Yeah, I talked to Neil about a week and a half ago, so I'm just waiting on a phone call back from him.
Okay.
How's Hunter Goodpaster doing?
Good.
He back to work?
No, he's hoping for March, June, something like that. I haven't talked to him for a couple of weeks. He stopped by the shop a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, looks good.
Yeah,
He
he
got
looks
his
good.
trach out.
Okay.
They took that out and sealed it back up. And he's got tentative plans to have his physician evaluate him for return to light duty, which we would obviously accommodate. Sure. Yeah, he's slowly on the mend. He's damn lucky to be alive. Yeah.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, I would have too.
Mr. Wade, I believe it's Catwinkle,
Howard.
an elderly couple.
What block is that in?
Go back to the Dropbox, we need to pick a meeting.
That's right.
5600.
That should get you back to, scroll down.
Why they gave me, that's a sketch of the office.
Who thought we'd have so much fun?
Wow, I didn't know what
This is awesome.
That's a long one.
Yeah. Well, just think we had 3. So,
I ran out of water.
Okay. Everybody here? Pete, come on up.
We still got the same problem.
I'm sure you do. I do know, and I'll respond, and maybe somebody else, but we have talked to the county engineer, and he's waiting on the county engineer to get back to him. And you might share your discussion with him a little bit of what.
Basically, I called down, talked to Neil, and,
Talk to me.
yeah, I talked to
He
Neil.
only called me when he never told me.
I didn't call him back yet either.
So I asked him if there was something they could do, or we could do conjoined, to help you, with both of us, to maybe help solve your problems.
Well, it should have been taken care of before it ever happened.
Well, that's probably true, but that's
Had
neither
30
here
feet
nor there.
through there. But there's a 50-foot under there. And the guy, his water comes down on the field.
Ain't no tile or anything or covered across 72.
Right.
Okay. The next place is any need for a, I guess it's out this time. The guy that bought that lot where the pond is, where you walk, he cut it across the end of it. He filled part of the pond up over on Larkspur. Well, anything over in that pond, it comes right down on it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the way they had that laid out, the way I understand it. But Mr. Petty told me when he first come out, you and Neil and Petty, they were there before you were.
Okay.
And Neil, he did say this would make a nice little pond. That's a comment that helps me. So anyway,
Well, let's,
then Petty, he said it shouldn't cost you a dime. He said they should have to take care of this, regrade, take his trees out of here. And he said, reseed it, because evidently the way it's laid out.
okay.
But then,
Well, anyway, we'll push Neil and try to get, call him again. You know what, we probably all want to call him. I'll call him. We'll all three call Neil too.
well, that'd be all right.
And,
I appreciate it.
try to get him to make a decision on it, put some money into it. Maybe we
Well,
can
how did you
provide
get
Start
some
with a recommendation on what to do.
recommendation to what to do with you.
How did they get to that point?
Step one.
We're gonna have to guide him on what we think is the best thing to do.
Okay.
This gentleman here, he came down,
Oh, I know.
he unplugged the tile, whatever on that.
Well, he's talked to Neil too, so we'll get back hold of Neil again, because that's been a couple of weeks.
And, his helper, him and his helper, they drove him down there, find the pipe, full pipe, fine. But they did find the one that, Larkspur there, said, I'd put a little cap on that thing, they wouldn't even see this.
Well, we'll call Pete and we'll call you and let you know what we said. In fact, we're all gonna call him and try to get Neil to do something.
And I tell you, they sure made a mess without him down there.
Hold on.
And even across on the other side of Meadowview, on the south side, that ditch line there lays in the water big part of the time. The water, the way they've got it, it comes back in with a cover, so it don't matter.
Nope. We'll see.
You see?
Sure.
Well,
All you have to do is drive
I
by
don't
there
know
by the
where
rain.
anybody paid any attention to it or not. It's down there like that. Eddie said that's the way it's supposed to be. What happened to, Beckley Lane? They ditch down there, why didn't they put it on down there?
I don't know, Pete.
And now, I will say that Eddie did too. That he contacted people over at the pond. We call it Stanley Pond. That's all I remember. Probably you too, till you got on it. But anyway, he said they didn't want to get in the pond. But then he told me later that they did give him permission to go through there. He had to get his survey field.
Okay.
That's it. But they've surveyed that thing out.
Yeah, I know, I'm sure. Well, we'll let you know as soon as we hear something.
Okay.
We'll push on.
I appreciate it.
I'm gonna call Neil tomorrow.
I'm gonna see Neil Saturday, so I'll talk to him Saturday.
Well, somebody needs to get through somewhere.
Yep, okay.
All right.
We'll give you a call.
I appreciate
All
it.
right, thanks, Pete.
Okay, man. You have a good week.
Okay, moving on to consent agenda. Anything to be removed from the consent agenda? Okay, hearing nothing, moving on to fiscal business, fiscal officer report.
Short and sweet, I don't have anything for you today.
Absolutely. New business. Planning and zoning.
Yeah.
5359.
Yeah, it's time to do some cleanup.
Weeds.
Yeah, well, you know,
This is windows, we got the
we
trash.
got some windows. we got
Vehicle.
At least 2 vehicles. Yeah, so this is a request to blanket the property with nuisance, see if they will actually clean it up. If not, we will then clean it up. We're gonna need to actually put some gravel in the driveway to actually gain access. We should talk to the road department, so if it goes forward, there's gonna be some things that we'll add as their expense. So hopefully it'll be incentive, since we can't get them to do anything just from the zoning department. We need your guys' support. That's what we're asking for.
They just need encouraged.
Yeah, we've held their hands on and off for the past 2 years trying to get it. And at some point, you have to be a grown up and do your own thing, so now I have to decide what to do.
Is there a motion to approve 5359, dispense with the second reading, declaring an emergency?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Muersfall.
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yay.
Mr. Wade.
Yay.
That's all? That's all I have. Thank you.
You sure?
I've only taken about 2 hours of your time tonight, so I can talk for some time, but I think I'm good.
Could have been worse.
Understand.
Road and Park, we have 5360, a resolution amending and revising Clear Creek Township Road Department's mailbox and winter road treatment operation procedures and dispensing with the second reading.
Yeah, so, I kinda read everybody else's mailbox policies and, winter road treatment operating procedures in the area, and, come up with one that would suit us in our township, since we are kinda rural in the south and not so much in the north. That's about it. Did you read them?
Yep. No, it's good adjustments.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd like to see the winter one on the webpage, so when people do complain, you know, it's on the webpage under the road department.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Our original mailbox policy was that we would just do a $75 mailbox, you know, post and regular mailbox, but in the last couple of years, we have hit a few of the ones in the higher end plaques, the HOA plaques that require certain mailboxes, and I don't feel like that's something that they should have to pay for if we hit.
Right.
So that's one of the main things I did change in there for the mailbox. And we had never had a winter road treatment procedure, so I wrote that one.
No, it's a good step forward, and I'm sure we can get it on there.
We need to put it out so our citizens can actually see it for themselves and we can refer to it. We have to have a tough conversation, you know, sometimes. It's just the reality of it. We can't clear in front of every driveway.
Right.
It's just a practical possibility.
That's right. You know, every political subdivision has exactly the same. You hear it on WOW and you're calling it,
Yeah.
people are just going nuts. They're just nuts. They're crazy. They're going crazy.
It's in my driveway 6 times.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
We haven't been through twice yet.
Okay.
The county replaced my neighbors across the street. Drive by there. It's literally sticking out on the road.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's...
They had a breakaway too. I don't know why they didn't replace it, just put it back.
Yeah.
I could roll my window down and slap it. Yeah. He called me, he goes, what do you think about that? So, doesn't look right to me, but I don't know what.
Only if you want a different color next time.
Yeah. Exactly. And they had one of the plastic breakaways.
Yeah.
Which is, well, I'm sure what Christensen put in when they built the place.
Right.
And they replaced it with a pressure treated hose, metal mailbox. It's sticking out on the road. So I'm like, okay, well, that's not gonna last.
All right. So any other comments on 5360? Is there a motion to approve 5360?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Gabbard.
Yay.
Mr. Muersfall.
Yay.
Mr. Wade.
Yeah, and dispense with second readings. Okay, and then we have 5361, declaring a resolution declaring personal property as surplus and approving internet auction, direct sale, so on and so forth, dispense with second reading and declaring an emergency. Any particular item you want to point out on that, or?
I was originally pricing out to get a JCB, and the JCB come back with trade-in $51,000 more than John Deere.
More.
Which is probably a quite a bit better machine, but it's a lot of money. When I had the same option spec on them, so. We did the same thing we got.
Okay. Any questions on 5361? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Mr. Muterspaw.
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard. Yay. Mr. Wade.
Yeah. Then we have a recommendation to purchase with trade-in the new John Deere at a net cost of $62,975.75.
They gave us $61,000 for trade-in for our old one.
I would say still sounds like a great.
That's a great deal.
Good gosh. There's a motion to purchase this new John Deere loader.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Gabbard. Yay. Mr. Muterspaw.
Yay.
Mr. Wade.
Yeah. Anything else?
I did get a price on renting a wheel loader over the wintertime. I got 7 quotes, and they range anywhere from $7,000 to $5,000 a month for a rental.
So probably get it in November.
It'd be 4 to 5 months, depending on the renter.
What if you leased one?
Well, I went ahead and...
I mean, I don't love leasing, but,
What I did on this backhoe is I bought a bigger bucket too, so I bought 2 buckets in this boat, I didn't tell you that, for the wheel loader. That was my hang-up, is loading salt because the other bucket's so small.
Yep.
So we was able to quote a bigger bucket, so I have a quick hitch on the front for 2 buckets now. So we should be in good shape. The wheel loader was just to be able to dump salt faster.
Right, so probably just gonna get by without it.
Yeah.
Now. Okay. Thank you. Administration, sir.
Yeah, the only item of business for administration tonight is to bring forward the long-anticipated and worked on coterminous boundary agreement with the city of Springboro, and dispense with second reading and declare emergency. The main purpose behind the renegotiated coterminous agreement, as the board is aware, having discussed it prior, is to construct Station 24, a 4th fire station for the fire district to principally serve the city of Springboro, given its intended location. So, I bring forward the resolution with the coterminous agreement having worked for a number of months with the city and staff and Mr. Wade on it, and it's been a challenge. I think Mr. Wade would concede that as well. So,
More than a challenge. Well,
I bring it up to the board, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
anybody have any questions for Matt?
Yes,
Yes.
I'm going to have some questions and comments, I think. Let's see. Can I direct my questions to Steve and that with his comment?
Sure.
Okay. The past years when we've been talking about coterminous agreements, we were kind of projecting the amount of usage and the amount of costs paid by city residents and outside city residents. Were those numbers pretty much on track? Did you kind of survey or summarize what we concluded and what we found to be true?
Yes. The usage was approximately, give or take per year, 60% of the rents will be in the city and 40% of the rents will be in the township.
Okay, that's been pretty steady.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the revenues brought in was that, I think the last time we were looking at, we were paying about 60% of the budget to their 40%.
I think
And-
Russ would concede to that.
Pardon me?
Russ is the one that pulled the numbers for that, so I think
Right.
he probably
That's
stipulate that.
Pretty close.
Okay, within.
Right, yeah, ballpark.
Yeah.
And our numbers that we were projecting, excuse me, I'm dry as dusty, were increasing about 1% per year in the direction of the township paying more. Correct?
Yeah, I don't think it increased this past year, though. I think it was either steady or maybe even down 1%.
Mhm.
You remember that, Steve? Go on.
That's approximately right, I can pull it up.
Right.
Yeah, it went from 59% in 2019 to 58% in 20, and it stayed at 58 in 21 projected when these numbers were collected late last year.
Okay, right. Well,
So it did go up. You're back down a little bit, and it stayed the same.
you know, I've got some concerns with tying the firehouse purchase and acquisition with the conterminous agreement. You know, we don't know what the pattern of these revenues are going to be, or the usage is going to be over the next 10 years or 20 years. And you make a commitment, you know, 20 years out, that's 5 election cycles, or, you know, none of it's going to be around, Jason might be, but, you know, that's a long time to be making a commitment for the township leadership that far down the road. You know, I think I can't support a conterminous agreement, and I know the pluses and the minuses that we've talked about, but I can't support a conterminous agreement that's that long, that far encompassing, and tying things in. You know, the firehouse is needed, there's no question about that. But, you know, a $5 million firehouse, that contribution is just a part, you know. You know, a few months ago, we were thinking, well, we might kick in $3.5 million, but, you know, the way inflation is, it could be easily 10, if not more. So, you know, I would be real uncomfortable with, you know, I guess my perceived, and, you know, I see it as reality, the inequality. You know, if Springboro were in the opposite position, and we were saying, hey, Springboro, you're paying 60% of the load, and we're using it 60% of the time, and we're growing faster than you, so, or you're growing faster than us, but we want you to put in another firehouse too. I don't think that they would be happy about that. I think there would be some kickback on that.
Certainly could be, for sure. You know, I do look at the $5 million they're putting in as, it softens the blow.
Sure.
It doesn't fix it, I agree with you, Steve. It doesn't fix it. You know, with this all being said, of course, I put a lot of stock in the annexation, and that was able to get done a few years ago. But in this agreement, we asked to move that up for a longer period, or will that change? Won't change, will it?
With that term? I think the term is fairly well where they wanted it to be, where we were comfortable with, and where they wanted it to be. I asked them to lower the term.
I know.
This last time, they weren't receptive to that.
Well, if we can continue it softens the blow for me with the annexation thing, if that moves out to a longer period.
Sure.
It should in this agreement, right?
Yeah, I mean, it'll extend
Because originally the current was gonna run out in 26.
28.
28, thank you. So now this takes it out to,
30,
yeah, 20 years, basically, right?
I thought I saw 41.
41, sorry. Okay, 41, so that's
Well, I think it's gonna be 42 now.
42.
42, yeah.
2042.
We'll still.
Yeah.
Might not go be.
We'll be good. You're right.
Well,
Made fun of my mobile version too, that's okay.
I appreciate your points. It's worth it to me to have that agreement in there and look for the balance to come as we grow and pick up more accidents, or you need to say more calls, and more revenue also. And keep that coterminous agreement with the annexation, them having to approve, or us having to approve anything on the annex.
There was at least an expressed willingness that I heard from the city to try to work on a committee approach to try to find some more fundamental balance to it as well.
Yeah.
Even after the coterminous agreement is decided between the board of trustees and the city council, so.
Well, which I think is a good idea.
Sure.
You know, Steve, I think it would be great to be on there. Quite frankly, I've been on there doing that long enough. We need somebody different in there to go in and kick the tires, so to speak. Steve can't get away from it because of your position.
Sure.
Anyway, I think it's a great idea.
Just to bring it up, I know we discussed it, but everybody needs to understand that there was at least a.
Yeah. Well, they did really want to do that.
Yeah. I think, what we're looking at though also is we had, stagnant, change in that percentage for the last year or two. That was, during the COVID and everything shut down. And I see a big increase of, taxes coming in and I see a lot more increase on that percent per year coming up. And, when I, run for reelection or whatever, I want to be able to look township people in the eye and say,
We got a good deal or we didn't.
Yeah, and here's why we're paying this amount of money, because we're subsidizing the city folks.
Jason?
I've made my argument against that thought process pretty well known, but the fact is, we're building $1 million homes in the township. That's where the inequity comes in. Royal Oaks is gonna be Royal Oaks in another 40 years. Their homes are never gonna be at the value that our homes are on average because of the density and the size of the home they build.
Right.
So, I don't see that changing. Do I see it getting closer to, as we add things like we just approved, as we see new developments go in? I see that. How does it balance? I don't know for sure, but again, I go back to my original point, that I go to North Wing, I go to Heroes, I go to China Cottage. My child goes to school in the city. If she falls down the hallway, that's a city call on a township resident. We don't have a mechanism to measure that. So what do? We do the best we can with what we have, and I feel like this is the best deal that we can get. In 2041, if this in fact stays 20 years, which we've renegotiated it before. Twice, yeah. So I don't anticipate that truly being the term, but if it is, what will that look like? I don't know, but I feel like us being able to maintain that annexation piece is only going to help us try to come to some sort of balance with that use of the money, because if we let them annex it, there go quarter-acre lots. There go higher calls, there go more houses. So I feel like, from our perspective, we're being good stewards by doing that. And I agree with Mr. Wade in that I feel like it's as good a deal as we're ever going to get to be able to maintain the township in the way that we want to. And that takes a big piece into consideration as to the burden it puts on our fire district. We can only negotiate in how many nursing homes they're allowed to put in. That would be awesome, but we can't do that. So it's just that we have to. I understand the concern, but also know that I'm happy about the fact that my house is valued higher than a lot of the houses that are in the city. So.
Okay, any other comments? Steve, I appreciate your comments.
I do too.
All right, with that, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve or deny resolution 5362.
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Gabbard?
Yay.
And Mr. Wade?
Yay.
And Mr. Beaversmall?
Nay.
Okay. Anything else under administration at this time?
I'd love to stop with the staff update and talk about a couple of things.
Like what?
Wait till staff updates to talk about a couple of things.
Yep. Police department, just on the consent agenda?
I got nothing tonight. Try to do my best.
You
here.
deferred yours to Jeff?
All right.
You could have brought ice cream.
Steve, anything else?
I just wanted to thank everybody for all their work on the coterminous agreement. Everybody had great points. Just listening to it, it was a really hard thing to work through, and I know working with Matt, this is the first big project we worked together on, and it was a lot of late calls and
The thanks needs to go that way.
everybody. So it's much appreciated. So,
Yeah, Matt, you did a great job.
I appreciate it. Finally got time to work on the station.
No, sometimes it's a challenge for you.
yeah, there's a lot to it. I think this is a good start. I don't think it's the finish line.
Yeah. Okay, if nothing else on that, we have now the next item is a consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Approve consent agenda.
Sorry, we were talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Approve the consent agenda, so moved.
So moved, I'm sorry.
Second.
Mr. Beaversmall?
Yeah, it was him.
I got it.
Yeah.
Yay.
Mr. Wade? Yay.
Let's get this going, wheels are going on.
Okay.
We're having problems with Russia's down there.
I don't think that's like you
I've
were
coached him
starting
well.
on the coterminous agreement again.
No.
He heard the seed. Consent
I'm not
determined.
connected to the city. I'm not doing anything.
Okay, then, staff update, sir.
Speaking of the cities, man.
Utica and State Route 122, I got off the phone, talked to Kurt Weber this morning, or actually this afternoon about it. They report that Officer Morgan, Corporal Morgan, put together was, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but it was exceptional work. He did a really nice job on it. And made a pretty good case for some work at that intersection, just by the organization of the report and how well it was done. So appreciate him doing that. The engineer's office digested that report, and they considered several options. Among them was making it a four-way stop. Kurt admitted to me that he was actually leaning that way when we first considered it at first blush, but it doesn't sound like that ended up being the preferred direction the engineer's office wanted to go to, just because people were used to truckers and through traffic was used to not having to yield or stop at all on State Route 122. So the ultimate recommendation that the engineer's office committed to me on the phone was to install flashing lights, red on Utica north-south, yellow on State Route 122, east-west. I did make a suggestion to them for something that Chief Turner actually saw when he was in Michigan. Somehow there was a loop detector that sensed when a car was approaching on what would be the Utica Road, the street that has to yield to the through. So you run over a sensor and it activates signs on the through road that says traffic is approaching. It's a lighted sign that flashes, says traffic is approaching at the intersection. So it gives warnings to the through drivers. And they said they were familiar with that, and they had actually tried it down at, on Western Road, down where Social Foster is. I haven't been down in that area in years, down at Deerfield, believe that. And,
I've seen it, actually.
I have not.
Yeah.
But, and he said that the Butler County engineer also tried it in an area somewhere, but they're still collecting data on it. But at minimum, they committed to doing flashing lights, pricing out what that might be, instead of flashing stop sign. And I said, well, let's pick the low-hanging fruit first and see how it works. So that's what they've orally committed to do.
100%. 100% on them.
To do the flashing light, I suppose they could get cold feet if the expense was too high, but I would think they'd have a pretty good idea what flashing lights are going to cost.
Right, because there had been discussion that we would share.
Well, he didn't ask for it to share, and I didn't offer them, but if we have to take a more aggressive remedial strategy in the
One of the
future.
reasons I like you, man.
If we have to be more aggressive, if it doesn't work,
Sure.
frankly.
Oh, absolutely, we need it.
We can step up and say, okay, we'll peel off some cash to find a better solution. But, figured we'd pick the low-hanging fruit first.
Good.
Well done. I asked Jeff to pull this up for the second staff update. I won't belabor the point because we've been here a long time tonight. But this has been an ongoing discussion, as most of you are probably aware, about the school traffic issue that we've got on 741 during peak hours. We've had some discussion about what to do to alleviate some of those issues. And of the options that we've heard, I've heard some people talk about, in the room that we were in, diverting some of the traffic onto Widener Road. Now, Widener and Lower, not a great intersection. There's a blind corner around the cemetery. Same thing with 741 down here. Barry, I don't need to tell you how hilly it is.
Okay, well, apparently I can't control the mouse. Way too far for us.
That's okay.
Yeah, you're gonna need to stop doing that.
So yeah, this here, you don't have great sight distance down here either. And the concern is putting young drivers into bad situations at the intersections. So not an ideal situation, but it was at least an idea that was
Truthfully,
floated.
that road can't take buses.
I know.
We're gonna end up, somebody's gonna have to end up rebuilding that road.
I don't think they're talking about putting bus traffic out there. I
No,
think they're talking about
just the-
vehicular traffic.
Oh.
Yeah, they're not, I think they would specifically avoid any that
When they
traffic
built it,
unless necessary.
They came to us when they built the school, and wanted to bring buses out of there, and we said no.
And I referenced that in the email that I sent to you. I know it's a discussion that's happened, but yeah.
Okay, so it's just cars,
Just, yeah.
that didn't click. Well,
I'm sure the residents
still,
would
it's
be
still a
happy
tough,
about it.
it's a tough spot to, drivers out on. Fun road, we have a fun road to drive, I mean, don't be flying around those curves.
Well, and here's what I'll, and again, I'm the, yeah, exactly, Steve Moore. I'm the resident expert on this one. I do this every day. They do that very same thing on Red Line 5, they do it on Sprinkler Road, they do it on Pekin. the challenge is becoming, and the solutions that were raised, I don't believe are in the best interest of everyone involved, but that's the path of least resistance in the eyes of the people that made them. Right? Fair enough? But now Pekin is becoming where you're backed up 25 cars deep because people are starting to realize that they can come from the north and not do RL5, they come all the way down to Pekin and over. So that's how I take Lydia, and how I've always taken her once they close down Heatherwood. The irony is they don't let you not drive through Heatherwood after you've unloaded them, but they don't let you drive through when you're going to unload them or depart. So I felt like the solution that we had with the extension of RL5 out to 741 was the best possible scenario. It does not alleviate the issues with 741 through town, which is part of what Chris's concern is. Yeah. And I would submit that that's where the city and the school district need to discuss the fact that they've got 6 through 12 riding the same bus, which requires drop-off at SI, which is not designed for it, to occur during this exact same time frame. So if I drop my daughter off at the high school, and I turn left and go down the hill, traffic is backed up to 73 at 7:15 in the morning. And part of that, and I'm not saying it's a great solution because it affects busing, obviously. Part of that could be avoided by stagger starting the school time. They consolidated that when they ran into the busing issue. In my opinion, the buses aren't the problem, it's people being able to drop their kids off. So you stagger start and bus riders come at one time and then everybody else comes a half hour later, and part of that problem is solved. And then people try to turn around the Christian church and it's a disaster. We all know Widener can't support it. The Widener scenario paints Pioneer Boulevard, Factory Road, and Myers Farm into the connector from the north. So I feel like they're trying to alleviate traffic coming from a part of town that opening up that backside may not even service. Because if you look at that and say, which way would you go if you lived in Settlers Walk?
Right.
Would you drive down 741 and make a right on 73? And no, you're gonna turn in and go through Royal Oaks if they figure it out the way to go. So it's gonna put a burden on every street, every north-south corridor we have in the city and the township. So, I mean, the good answer is they wouldn't have put all these schools on top of each other. We could have spread out the traffic, but yeah, or have them all.
You're gonna have to go all the way to 122.
I know. I'm just gonna exactly. I mean, and when Lydia starts driving, it scares me even more because that, as we've talked about, the Pekin intersection is no bargain. So she and I talk about it a lot because we almost bought a house right by it, and that exit of our driveway would have been tough. So I read the emails. I understand that it looks attractive because if the county who is involved wants to make the type of improvements to Beale, or, well, partially to Beale, to Widener,
in just a second.
to Lower, I mean, then you got something to talk about.
Yeah, they fully acknowledge the difficulties of...
The other challenge to me is if you put a throughway through the school property and it dumps out, you're gonna have to control that gate. It's gotta be gated, it's gotta be school hours only.
When we were brainstorming, one of the options that came up was, in fact, to make that connector and extend Beale through the school property. Now, the school hasn't been checking on their ideas for that, but it does lend itself to a natural bisection of this and a secondary road that can collect traffic off keep it off of 741 by bringing it down RL5. So basically, you just be crossing 741 for a lot of folks.
But there again, you cross the hill on 741 coming north, and if you don't get hit by 705, you're sitting at the top of it.
Yeah, I mean,
The line of
there's
sight, the line of sight is better than where it comes out now, but, yeah, I mean, there's no good answer.
Yeah, everybody acknowledges there's no good answer.
Yeah, it's, the wider road corridor, whether you go north or south.
The good answer is when we were gonna put the bypass around town before they bought the land and built the golf course.
See,
That didn't happen.
you should have done it then, Ed, nice job.
What the,
Coble.
Eastern corridor?
That was Coble,
Coble
yeah.
went from, I was all for it, Coble went from that to the golf course.
Or buy the land from the east and build a high school. And you got a 4-lane highway.
Well, I wanted the board to be aware of that discussion. Let's briefly talk about it. That's all.
I ran into
Good luck with that.
the city engineer today, and we discussed it for a minute, and I told him to thank Chris for volunteering us to absorb all of the backlash. I mean, it's, you wanna talk about a long meeting.
Inadequate roads.
Yeah. The residents, sometimes Larry Barton might even make an appearance at that meeting.
Well, you know, the city could take all those parking areas down to Main Street and put a continual turn lane.
I know.
And, open
That's-
that out.
yeah.
There's enough room.
They could have bought the second row houses all the way up Main and Wallow, which is what Westerville did, and put so much parking there would never be a turnover in a business. There'd be plenty of parking. They bought the first house all the way behind every one of those old houses. They bought every one of the first houses, tore them down, built a parking lot.
You know what? There's not that many.
There are gonna be a couple that you'd have to tear down that are older.
Right, but I mean, how many? We got 15?
Yeah, but look at the size of their lot and how many parking spaces.
Oh, no, that's, I mean,
Yeah.
so the expense to buy them
Wouldn't be bad.
wouldn't be bad
No.
for what the city
Nope.
spends on.
I told John about that years ago. Right after I told, this was when they were fighting with Walmart.
City would cover that too.
Yeah.
Follow the
And they built that, so they had that lot across the street where they built the parking lot. Did you go by there?
Where's that?
They only use half the lot unless they don't own the other half. It's on Black Street as you go down. It's right before you get to the factory. They're putting it on the right-hand side behind the,
Oh, yeah, I saw it.
what is that, the bike charging station or whatever? I don't even know.
Rotary Park.
Rotary Park, that's what it is, I'm sorry. That's right, the charging station's by Mr. Burrows.
Okay.
So,
All right, anything else? Anybody have anything else? Let's go watch some basketball. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Second.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay.
Mr. Butersbaugh?
Yay.
Mr. Wade?
Yes, sir.
As soon as the end there, Mr.
Mr. Miles,
First
you wanna stay here longer?